Am I overreacting? I broke up with my girlfriend. Apologies in advance for the lengthy post. Summary: I ended my relationship with my girlfriend after months of feeling mistreated, ignored, and isolated. Now, I am finding it difficult to cope with my choices. I, a 25-year-old male, broke up with my now ex-girlfriend, a 25-year-old female, last week, and I am struggling to come to terms with my decision. We were together for 2 years, and our relationship started off intensely passionate. Both of us came from abusive backgrounds and were cautious with one another, but once things clicked, they really clicked. She had a 5-year-old daughter who also joined our family dynamic. This experience was entirely new to me, but I quickly grew to care for her as if she were my own, and I would do anything for her. Up until Christmas 2024, everything seemed perfect. We had plans to buy a house, have children, and go on vacations. Everything felt like it was straight out of a movie. However, during December, I became seriously ill with the flu coupled with chest infections and an undiagnosed virus. I was bedridden and struggled to even take a shower, let alone do chores. While I attempted to assist as much as I could, it placed a significant burden on her. For context, one of my flaws was not helping enough when it was necessary, whether it involved a quick cleanup of toys. Despite consistently encouraging the 5-year-old to pitch in for life lessons, washing dishes, or other general tasks. My ex frequently brought up these shortcomings every couple of months. While I acknowledge that I have a highly stressful job in sales and occasionally needed time to decompress, I recognize that this was no justification for neglecting responsibilities. During the Christmas season, when I was unable to help or even get out of bed, a substantial argument erupted shortly before our time off work. We took the 5-year-old out to see Christmas lights, which turned into a catastrophe. I struggled to breathe and found every small thing irritating. I admit it was my fault, but I lost my temper when the child became overly excited and attempted to run off in a crowded area. This incident only intensified our issues. After the holidays passed, she began to withdraw emotionally. She wore a mask of smiles, concealing her frustrations from me. Conversations became sparse, her behavior seemed suspicious, and our intimacy disappeared. This was when her mistreatment began. I didn't dwell on the situation. Instead, I asked her if everything was all right, to which she responded with a nonchalant indicating yes, several times. I pressed further, expressing that she seemed off and asking if she was sure. This prompted her to snap back that she was absolutely fine. This continued for about 2 weeks until I reached my breaking point. She went out with friends, I had no issue with this, by the way, and called me to pick her up from town. The 5-year-old was with her grandparents for the weekend. I told her I would arrive in 2 minutes. However, her unexpected response was a complaint about having to wait in the cold despite it lightly snowing while I took a 20-minute drive. She implied that I didn't care about her safety and that she would take an Uber instead. This would require another 40-minute drive past the town, which annoyed me, but I went regardless. I left around midnight and was instructed to wait in the car near her friend's parents' house. I was finally let in at 3 a.m. I was unsure of the exact time I arrived since I got lost, but I estimate it to be around 1 a.m. To me, this felt entirely disrespectful. She was aware I was waiting and even texted to update her on my arrival. She responded that she needed 5 minutes to finish her drink. While I was understanding initially, waiting outside for 2 hours felt excessive. When I inquired about what was taking so long, I was predictably met with a brief outburst of shouting and another episode of silence. This was around the 3rd week of January, marking 2 to 3 weeks of very minimal communication. Sunday morning came, and I had been awake all night, contemplating everything. I barely slept, if at all. I packed an overnight bag because I needed space, but before leaving, I aimed to communicate. I allowed her to sleep in, and by around 10 or 11 a.m., she awoke but remained in bed. I thought this was acceptable. After all, it was a Sunday, and she was likely feeling the effects of a hangover. As I listened to her moving around the flat with its thin walls, I decided to confront the issue directly. I asked her if she was ready to talk like adults and resolve whatever problems we had, whether they were one-sided or mutual. She firmly declined, saying, "No," so I informed her that I would be leaving for a few days to gain clarity. I needed to make 2 trips, one for my overnight bag and another for my clothes and shoes for work. When I returned to grab my belongings, I found her sitting up with teary eyes. I am soft-hearted when it comes to crying. I genuinely empathize with others and dislike causing anyone sadness, regardless of how they treated me. She pleaded with a tearful voice, "I don't want you to go." It sounded sincere, and I believed it. We shared tears and discussed our issues. This conversation revealed her concerns about my failure to help out enough and my impatience with her daughter when she merely needed guidance rather than raised voices during challenging moments. I understood the points she made, but I stressed that I needed her to communicate her concerns promptly rather than shutting down for weeks. In my previous relationship, I had been made to feel incredibly small, insecure, and paranoid due to both mental and physical abuse, which she was aware of. I also knew that in her past relationship, whenever she voiced an issue, it was met with anger and violence. I completely understood her perspective, but I needed to emphasize that I was not that person and that my needs deserved recognition as well. We agreed that from that point on, any issues would be discussed openly, and if either of us required assistance, we would simply have to ask. However, this arrangement lasted only about 2 weeks. She once again began to withdraw emotionally, becoming increasingly protective of her phone, and I caught her searching through mine without permission. I confronted her immediately, asking why she believed she could look through my phone without my consent. For the record, I truly had nothing to hide. She had her Face ID set on my phone. I also reminded her of our earlier conversation, which prompted her to react defensively, questioning me about the supposed bargain we had made and imploring me to ease up on the 5-year-old. I believed in tough love, but not to the point of shouting and screaming. She pushed my boundaries. I felt compelled to reprimand her since she had been hitting and biting me when things didn't go her way, which I refused to tolerate. Perhaps it was too harsh, but she didn't repeat that behavior afterward. Despite my attempts to resolve things, we began arguing again. Long story short, she told me that if I wished to leave, she wouldn't stop me. It became glaringly obvious that our relationship was not going to work out. I argued my case and asked for her support in addressing issues with the child before I had to intervene. Children can undoubtedly sense any tension between parents and will respond accordingly. We discussed this further, and I began packing again, this time not just a few items, but everything. I removed all of my hanging clothes and packed them into bin liners. Once I finished, I was confronted at the door with the same plea as before. "Please don't go." I insisted that I needed just one night away. That night opened my eyes. No more deception, no more shady actions, and no more searching for justification. I confronted her about her snooping and questioned why she felt the need to hide her phone. I had my suspicions that perhaps she was distancing herself to make room for someone new, given new colleagues at her workplace or someone she'd met while out with friends. The address I had been given wasn't even her friend's house, despite having met them before. I was caught in a whirlwind of confusion and doubt. I took one night for myself and returned to the flat. We spoke and cried again, and she allowed me to look through her phone, where I found no evidence of wrongdoing. In hindsight, this conversation came too late, but at that moment, I felt content. We experienced a few excellent weeks, probably the best in months, with enough physical intimacy to feel somewhat connected. When Valentine's Day arrived, however, I was in for a shocking disappointment. To keep it brief, I received nothing, not a card, a gift, or any acknowledgement of appreciation, which was disheartening. Although I am not materialistic, a small gesture would have meant something to me. I had ordered gifts, handwritten love notes, and flowers for both her and her daughter. I even sent flowers to her workplace as an extra surprise. Her response was to express embarrassment, declaring it would be humiliating to receive a delivery at work that would lead to gossip. I could not comprehend her reaction and felt utterly unappreciated. Perhaps I would understand if it were an extravagant gesture, but it was merely a simple delivery, not extravagant at all. We talked about this, and she indicated she did not celebrate Valentine's Day. However, the previous year, she was incredibly affectionate and made me feel loved. This made me question the last few months and led me to believe I was being phased out. She just lacked the courage to directly tell me to leave, possibly preferring that I exit instead. As the weekend passed, we barely spoke. I picked her up from work as usual on Saturday, while Sunday was uneventful due to inclement weather, so we stuck to separate areas while cleaning our flat. I inquired about why our conversations felt one-sided and why we appeared to be going in circles. This gnawed at me and caused overwhelming frustration. I received no response. When I pressed further, asking if I was going to find out if she was indeed cheating, she reacted angrily, telling me I was deluded. I stepped away to cool off. I didn't want to shout or argue, I simply wanted clarification, and it seemed I wasn't going to get that. As Tuesday approached, it was half-term in the UK, and the 5-year-old was at a sleepover in the same building. Around 9 p.m., we received a call to pick her up because she did not want to spend the night. That was understandable. She was only a child. However, the little girl started acting out, wanting to stay up late and becoming aggressive. I was already exhausted and irritated from a difficult day at work, and entering a hostile environment was not a pleasant experience. By 10:30 p.m., I had reached my breaking point and told her that if she didn't get into bed and fall asleep immediately, we would cancel the fun activities planned for the remainder of the half-term. This was met with the mother exclaiming that she didn't understand why I was getting so angry and that no one wants you to stay. My heart shattered. For context, I had a close, loving bond with the 5-year-old, and people from our families often remarked on how remarkable my care for her was. She was not just a stepdaughter. She was, in every way that mattered to me, my daughter. I retreated to my bedroom in tears, knowing deep down that it was the end for me. I called my stepfather and grandfather to assist with relocating my belongings the next day, as I didn't have hours to do so as in previous times. I wanted to leave immediately. That evening, while they went to a sleepover at her sister's, I saw my opportunity to depart without being stopped. I left without leaving anything behind. When I eventually called my ex to explain my actions, she already knew, as she and her daughter were back home around 9 p.m. She mentioned it was the last thing they wanted, but expressed understanding for my choice. She acknowledged that her earlier comment had been nasty and hurtful, though she claimed she didn't mean it. I interrupted, saying that she could have come to apologize if she didn't intend to hurt me. The situation escalated when I encountered one of her friends from the flat while letting my grandfather and stepfather in, leading me to believe they gossiped about my departure, which reached her quickly. That was why they were home, not because the child requested to return. She could have called me to retrieve them, as they were across town, but instead, she didn't bother, even knowing I had left before returning. The process of collecting my belongings took about an hour, and although there was an opportunity to contest my decision, she chose not to. This made it clear to me that I wasn't wanted, and her words were indeed meant. Afterward, I received videos of the 5-year-old crying for me to come back, which tore at my heart, and I was tempted to return, but I held firm. The following day, I received another video of the 5-year-old calling me naughty daddy for leaving behind a coaster that said "Greatest Dad," causing me to sob uncontrollably over the heartfelt sentiment attached to it. Returning to my earlier summary, we have conversed via text every day since, for 6 days, about the 5-year-old in brief messages, though my ex remains dismissive of anything more I express. I confessed that I cried during my drive to my mother's, and her reply was to tell me to stop being silly. I miss the 5-year-old immensely, but I know I cannot return to a situation where I am disrespected while trying to be a responsible parent. It should have been a joint effort from the start. I regret how I handled the confrontation, as the 5-year-old didn't receive a proper goodbye, nor did I get to say a proper farewell. I wish I hadn't taken the hurtful comments so seriously and had chosen to talk through it again. However, I cannot ignore my feelings of frustration over being disrespected. My ex has openly stated that the 5-year-old still loves me and that I am welcome to see her whenever I wish. I was a fantastic father and must remember how much I was appreciated by the 5-year-old and the love I provided for her when she needed it. This situation has deeply affected my thoughts because if she genuinely felt that way, we wouldn't be in this predicament. I frequently reflect on the joyful moments I shared with my ex, but I wonder if this is simply loneliness setting in. My previous breakup was much more straightforward, while this situation has left me feeling shattered. Am I in the wrong? Are my feelings valid, or did I overreact and ruin everything? I feel as though I have destroyed any chance at a future together and am truly heartbroken. I am open to any opinions, criticisms, or validation. All comments are genuinely appreciated during this confusing time. Thank you for taking the time to read my post. Story 2. My ex, 22M, secretly ran a loyalty test on me, 21F, on my birthday. I am a 21-year-old female who ended my relationship with my 22-year-old male ex around a month ago, and I have now completely distanced myself from him. There is a great deal of context surrounding our breakup. It's a lengthy tale and not your typical separation. To summarize, my ex went behind my back and messaged several guys I followed on Instagram, inquiring about how they knew me. He even joined in on making negative comments about me with one of them. The layers of deception, betrayal, and emotional manipulation throughout our relationship are numerous. How I discovered the truth. I sensed that something was amiss, so I looked through his phone while he was asleep. That's when I came across a burner account, one from which I was blocked, where he had messaged a total of 5 guys, asking them about me. We had been dating for 5 months at that point, and he had intentions of marrying me the following year, so I assumed this was his way of conducting a final background check before committing. 3 guys responded, but the most troubling conversation was between him and a guy I had previously been rejecting for months. I had met this guy online, and we communicated occasionally, but I found him irritating and only replied out of courtesy. I had no romantic interest in him and genuinely believed we were merely friends. Eventually, after numerous unanswered messages, he grew disinterested, removed me, and unfollowed me. It seems he harbored some resentment towards me for this, so when my ex reached out, he seized it as a chance to twist the narrative and portray me as someone who had been pursuing him. In their messages, my ex informed him that I was his girlfriend. He literally stated, "It's my girl." And that's when the guy successfully sowed doubt in the impressionable mind of my ex. He told my ex that women, he used a different term, like me, couldn't be trusted, that he shouldn't allow a girlfriend to hinder his search for a wife, and that girls with big egos should go elsewhere. At this point, it was clear he had no valid evidence against me, yet my ex continued to pry and engage in conversation as if they were friends. My ex informed him that he wanted to know everything and claimed I was not his first girlfriend and that he had a significantly more extensive past than I did. I found this particularly intriguing since he had previously told me he feared women, an age-old excuse. When we first started talking, claimed he was a virgin upon meeting me and said I was his first kiss and first love. He attempted to deceive and justify himself by saying he was referring to talking stages and an ex-girlfriend. I was aware of this ex from the beginning, yet that message suggested something far more substantial. Another revolting detail is how my ex casually told this stranger, entirely unsolicited, that he missed out on my significant transformation. The exchange was losing momentum when he mentioned needing to thank him because around 2023, I was going through an emo phase, which I have since overcome. He boasted about how I looked great now. It's disturbing to the point of being somewhat humorous, as my emo phase was something I had shared with him in confidence, while he went on to describe my former appearance in detail to a complete stranger, essentially objectifying me. I wanted to include the screenshots because they are so amusing, but the subreddit prohibits it. The most comical part of the screenshot was where he responded to his own message about my bangs and nose ring, having overlooked a crucial detail: my thin eyebrows. Their conversation eventually faded, but guess what? My ex messaged him again on my birthday. He asked him to send me a follow request and a birthday message to gauge my response. The most ironic aspect: the night before, my ex had called me, sang happy birthday to me, sent me a pre-recorded video expressing how much he loved me and wished me well for 2025. We talked on the phone for a while, and before we ended the call, he sensed I was feeling down. He reassured me, told me he loved me, and continued texting until 2 a.m. At precisely 2 a.m. after all that, he messaged the other guy and asked him to test my loyalty. When I woke up on my birthday, my ex had flowers and chocolates delivered to my home and spent the entire day communicating with me as if everything were normal. I had no clue that, behind the scenes, he was trying to set me up. I remember seeing a follow request from the guy that day and declining it immediately. He later reported back to my ex, stating that I had declined, but instead of stopping there, he urged him to send me a birthday message regardless. When I did eventually respond to the birthday message out of curiosity, my ex took issue with the fact that I even replied, despite the fact that he was the one who orchestrated the entire situation. At that point, the other guy began making comments again about how you can't trust women. My ex, rather than shutting this down, encouraged it. Meanwhile, I had already dismissed the guy in the conversation, stating that I had a boyfriend. However, my ex, in his messages, acted as though he was testing to see if I would even mention my boyfriend, saying, "If she doesn't, I'm so done." Once I clarified that I was in a relationship, the other guy persisted, trying to see if I would break, telling me I shouldn't let a boyfriend interfere with finding a husband. The same overused, foolish line. I ignored him, and when he attempted again, I blocked him. In the meantime, my ex continued to praise him in messages, saying, "I appreciate you putting in overtime for me." He was too oblivious to realize that the guy was not doing this for him. He was doing it to boost his own ego. The aftermath. I discovered other incriminating evidence on my ex's phone, but this was by far the most damning. The fact that he allowed a complete stranger to disrespect me, and even joined in demonstrated that he was not even close to the man he pretended to be. A month after exiting that situation, I do not even miss him. I do not dwell on what we had because, in retrospect, none of it was genuine. He emotionally manipulated me from the beginning, and I suspect he may have had sexual encounters with someone else around the time he was love-bombing me, claiming that he had eyes for no one else. I suspect this because I found a photo of him with another girl in his My Eyes Only folder on Snapchat. This picture spoke volumes. The room was dimly lit. He was literally licking his lips, his arm was around her waist, and she was slightly perched on his lap. It was around 4 a.m., and this, along with another picture of her, constituted the only two items in that folder. It felt like a strange method of retaining evidence to showcase that they had shared intimate moments together. Disgusting. Looking back, I realize he was a profoundly insecure person who had no genuine intention of loving or caring for me as he claimed. His words were meaningless because his actions never aligned with them. He placed me in danger, both emotionally and physically, in terms of my sexual health, and completely drained me. The love and care I offered him were never reciprocated properly, and I am at peace knowing I can now devote my time to better pursuits. I will not delve into a deep analysis of his psyche, but to put it simply, his past pain and suffering shaped his insecurities, compelling him to seek constant validation, whether through romantic attention from women or approval from other men. That is why his relationships remain superficial, and why he sabotaged what I believe to be the first sincere relationship he had. The first day I told him I loved him, we exchanged love letters, expressed our love, and became official. He broke down in tears, stating that no one had ever cared for him before. It is evident he did not grow up feeling loved or worthy of it, and, cliché as it may sound, he undermined a wonderful relationship because he felt undeserving. I do not mention this to excuse his behavior, but I can now see the damage clearly. Part of me feels sympathy for him because he will likely remain trapped in this cycle unless he actively chooses to change. However, that is no longer my concern. When I think of him, I feel no anger. I feel no sadness. I feel nothing at all. It is not numbness, it is indifference. I have released him from my life and am genuinely pleased to be moving forward. He taught me an invaluable lesson that will significantly aid me in navigating future relationships. I am free. One last thing, though there is so much more I could share. The day we broke up, he made a Reddit post sugarcoating the story and was absolutely criticized. That detail helps me sleep soundly at night, and I am thankful for those Reddit users. Story 3. My dad stole and spent my savings, and now my mom won't talk to me over the argument. Hello, I am a 19-year-old female, and I have been employed at this small bar and restaurant for several months now. I come from a family of 5. It includes me, my twin brother, and our younger brother, who is around 7 years old. We completed high school a few months ago, and while we both passed, I performed better, which will be significant shortly. I live with both of my parents, but my father struggles with alcoholism, so 9 times out of 10, he spends his time and money at bars. My mother works as a secretary and manages nearly everything at home, which I truly appreciate. Last year, my brother and I graduated from high school, and we have a grading system in our region that determines eligibility for university admission. We both qualified, but I was 2 grades ahead of him. Initially, I did not think much of this since we would both be government-sponsored, meaning our university expenses would be significantly reduced to only half. Fast forward a week after the results were announced, and we began exploring schools and courses for our studies. My brother was determined to attend a specific school, but it did not offer the program he desired for government-sponsored students, meaning he would have to pay the full tuition. There were other schools that provided the same course, but he insisted that's what he wanted. His friends were enrolling there, so he seemed eager to follow them. We had a brief argument about it, as his tuition would be twice the amount, and only our mother would bear the cost. Additionally, my tuition would also contribute to the financial burden, so my mother promised to discuss it with him. After 2 days, she sat me down and conveyed that he won't change his mind, and emphasized that she needed to prioritize what she believed was best for him. She mentioned that if he feels that's where he will thrive, then that is the best option. I chose not to argue further because perhaps she had enough to cover all the expenses, so I agreed. She suggested that I could wait a little until he finishes his first year, and then we will see if I can join. While I was not angry, I felt hurt because it was her money, and her choice on whom to invest in seemed biased. My brother has always been a bit spoiled, despite us being the same age. After attempting to discuss it with her, I ultimately let it go. However, that is not the main issue. Last year, I decided to seek employment, hoping I could fund my tuition even if it meant a longer wait. I had been saving for the past 5 months and was helping out with minor household expenses that I could manage. My brother started school in January, so it has just been the 3 of us, along with our father. Unfortunately, a week ago, all of my savings disappeared. It turned out my father had taken it to go drinking with his friends, which I discovered while at work when a former classmate mentioned seeing him with her father and other men at a high-end bar. I returned home and informed my mother, asking her to inquire whether he had taken anything and if he could return it. I tend to be shy and do not speak up, so I usually avoid arguments or raising my voice. After a day without any updates from her, I decided to bring it up again to ask what my father had said and what steps we could take moving forward. She snapped at me, saying that I could always earn the money back or that I should take longer shifts to do so. I barely make enough as it is. I went to my room, feeling defeated. Then, just yesterday, I didn't give my little brother any lunch money because I told him to ask our mother for it since I only had enough for my bus fare and my lunch at work. This morning, she scolded me as if I were blaming them for my father's actions. I tried to explain that I simply did not have any money left and would contribute if I could. I expressed that she was being unfair and that her behavior was hurtful. This only made her angrier. She began hurling insults at me, claiming that if I were better at my job, none of this would occur and that since I am a girl, I should just find someone to take care of me. She brought up the inappropriate behavior from some men at work, using it against me. I have never raised my voice before, but I did yesterday, expressing how differently she treats me compared to others. She responded by saying it was tough luck because daughters are meant to be their father's princesses, and it's not her fault I don't have that. This comment stung deeply, but I chose to walk away. Once I calmed down, I resolved to apologize to her when I returned home that evening. However, she refused to speak to me and did not leave any food for me, claiming that was something bad moms do before she went to bed. Now, it is nearly midnight and I just got home from work. Everyone else is asleep, but this time the kitchen is locked, so I have no access to food. I realize I was wrong for raising my voice, and I have made several attempts to apologize, even texting her today to say that I did not mean to shout or call her names, but she is ignoring my efforts. I am unsure if it is selfish to feel that my emotions are valid and that she may be overreacting. This is the first argument I have ever had with her, so I do not understand why accepting my apology is so difficult. What can I do to ease her anger, or at least encourage her to talk to me? Apologies for the length. I just needed to express this one way or another. Edit. My mother is still not speaking to me, but I am feeling less bad about it now. I plan to open a bank account tomorrow. I have delayed doing so because I get paid in cash, and the bank is about 2 hours away from where I live. However, I will take care of it tomorrow. I do not earn enough to leave home yet, but I will save up for that. I also want to express my gratitude to everyone who shared their experiences with me, as it has helped me feel that this situation is not solely my fault, and I am thankful for that. For those who resorted to name-calling and saying hurtful things, please understand that it takes time for me to accept things as they are, and I do not deserve bad things simply because of my feelings. I believe everything will eventually work out, regardless of how long it takes. I hope you have a good day.